Members of the campaign to protect Sears Island rallied at the United Technologies Center in Bangor today. The rally took place outside of a community conversation about offshore wind hosted by the Maine Labor Climate Council, Maine Audubon, Maine Climate Action Now, the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and Iron Workers Local 7. The organizations are working together to share information with the public about the benefits of offshore wind. They say they are, quote, agnostic regarding the location of the site. Volunteers with the campaign to protect Sears Island are calling on these organizations to support their campaign to have offshore wind built on Mack Point rather than the currently proposed Sears Island.
We are supportive of union workers. We're supportive of energy independence and renewable energy infrastructure, but we're also supportive of biodiverse ecosystems, critical wildlife habitat, protecting ancestral territory, and the people who already work and live within the Penobscot Bay region.
What we have is a long timeline before anything really gets built. There's a lot of things that we agree on. You know, Chris earlier said that we are pro-unions and we are pro-offshore wind, location sensitive is what I heard. So there's a lot we can build off from there to make offshore wind a reality in Maine.
The state favors Sears Island for the port in part because the state owns the site.